If your feed looks anything like mine, you've seen people dunking into ice barrels or dripping out of saunas glowing like red dwarf stars. The promises made in these videos range from faster injury recovery and better metabolic health to immortality and curing morning breath. I'm Dr. Daniel Modell, an anesthesiologist. My job is literally managing human physiology 24/7. So today I'm going to rate cold plunges, hot saunas, and red light therapy by two things: the evidence and the risks. It's simple. I'll translate the physiology into plain English, pull in actual clinical data, and give each trend a final score. Now, I'm not your doctor, and I don't know your medical history or anything about you at all, so this isn't medical advice. But maybe if they're used smartly, one or two of these health trends might be worth your time and your money. So let's get nerdy with it and find out. Okay, so here's how I'm going to score this. First, I'll give an evidence score from 0 to 10. Randomized trials and meta-analyses beat anecdotes, and benefits and real outcomes beat lab markers. Second, I'll give a risk score, also from 0 to 10. Higher numbers mean more things that can go wrong. I'll also flag who each tool seems best for and who should skip it or maybe modify it. At the end, you'll get a single screen summary and my if you can only pick one recommendation, plus references so you can do some further reading for yourself if you're interested. Let's start with cold plunges and talk about what happens inside your body. Cold water is like a smack in the face to your system, and it sets off a full body alarm almost instantly. As soon as you hit that water, the blood vessels in your skin contract, your heart rate and your blood pressure spike, and you involuntarily gasp and then start to hyperventilate. That's called the cold shock response. If your face is underwater, then your diving reflex kicks in with the opposite effects: slowed heart rate and breathing rate and relaxed blood pressure. Those dueling reflexes can sometimes collide and become a tangled mess, which is what physiologists often call autonomic conflict. Meanwhile, cold interferes with inflammatory signaling, can slightly reduce nerve conduction, and significantly cool muscle temperature. Brown fat activation and calorie burn do rise acutely, but the effect is modest at best. The net physiology is sudden, massive stress, then gradual adaptation. That idea that small, controlled stressors administered in the right dose and context can make you more resilient is called the hormetic idea, or hormesis. It doesn't sound entirely unreasonable, but let's see what kind of evidence there is for it. For post-exercise soreness, the data does seem to support a small short-term reduction in muscle soreness after cold plunges compared with doing nothing. So it appears that it can actually help you feel better for a day or two. Where it gets messy though is strength and muscle growth. Multiple controlled studies show that regular cold immersion right after lifting can actually blunt anabolic signaling and reduce long-term muscle growth. So if you're training for size or max strength, that's not very good. Outside the gym, a randomized trial in the Netherlands found that adding brief cold at the end of showers reduced sick leave over 90 days. Not actual sickness, but the number of times people called out sick to work, which is interesting but doesn't really tell us anything about curative properties. Many people do report an acute mood lift after taking a cold plunge, but rigorous trials are still needed in order to determine a true causal association. The big picture here is that cold is a decent tool for soreness and alertness, but there's not much evidence that it helps with muscle growth or boosting your immune system. Now let's take a look at the risks of cold plunging. Since the cold shock response can cause involuntary gasping and hyperventilation, that presents a pretty real danger if your head is under the water. And the tug of war induced in your autonomic system can trigger arrhythmias, which are irregular heart rhythms, even in otherwise healthy people. And cold immersion, especially with exertion, has been linked to immersion pulmonary edema. That's fluid that accumulates in the lungs, and it happens when you make a strenuous inhalation, like an involuntary gasp, against a closed mouth or muscle spasm in your throat. That creates a significant negative pressure in your lungs, and that can act to pull fluid out of your capillaries and into the lung tissue and air spaces. It can cause sudden shortness of breath, coughing, and even low oxygen levels in your blood. Add heart disease, uncontrolled hypertension, recent cardiac symptoms, or pregnancy, and you'll probably need a personalized plan by a professional. Or maybe just skip it. If you do plunge, think progressive exposure. Keep your head out at first, have a friend with you for safety, and definitely avoid alcohol. After heavy lifting, push the plunge hours later or to non-lifting days if you care about growth. Remember, more cold doesn't mean more benefit, it's just more cold. Cold plunge, my ratings. Evidence, overall I'd give it a 5 out of 10. It's good for soreness, not good for performance, and limited for mood and immunity enhancement. Risks, overall I'd give it a 6 out of 10. It's low for cautious, healthy users, but higher with head submersion, heart disease, or breath holding. Now let's take a look at saunas and what heat does to your physiology. A traditional Finnish sauna is hot and dry, typically 80 to 100 degrees Celsius or 176 to 212 Fahrenheit, with low humidity. All that heat causes the vessels in your skin to dilate, which shifts blood toward the skin. It also boosts heart rate like going for a gentle run and drops vascular resistance. Your core temperature climbs, you sweat out a noticeable amount of fluid, and your blood pressure often falls immediately after. Repeated heat exposures look a lot like passive cardio for your vessels, better endothelial function and lower arterial stiffness short term. It's like a mini massage for your blood vessels. That's the physiology anyway. Now let's see what the studies show. Observational cohort studies from Finland link frequent sauna use with lower cardiovascular and all-cause mortality. That means people who use saunas regularly have fewer heart-related deaths, but also lower deaths from all causes. That includes cancer, strokes, autoimmune disorders, anything. Now, association isn't causation, meaning that this lower death rate isn't necessarily caused by the sauna use. But these are large, carefully followed groups, and the dose-response correlation, meaning the more sessions, the lower the risk, is pretty compelling. Experimental studies show acute drops in blood pressure and improved arterial compliance or stretchiness right after a session. And emerging trials suggest that post-exercise sauna use can augment training effects on blood pressure and cholesterol. There's also some indication of benefits for respiratory symptoms, but that one's less definitive. Importantly though, the best data come from Finnish-style high-heat, low-humidity saunas. Infrared cabins and steam rooms aren't the same things. Now let's talk about the risks. Most healthy people tolerate the sauna pretty well, but it is still a stressor. The main risks are dehydration, lightheadedness, syncope or fainting, and heat intolerance. And rarely there are some cardiac events in vulnerable people. If you're pregnant, have unstable coronary disease, severe aortic stenosis, poorly controlled blood pressure, or you've had recent fainting, talk to your doctor first before using heat therapy. Definitely skip alcohol, hydrate before and after, and stand up slowly. If you finish with cold, avoid plunging your head and holding your breath. The hot to cold swing can be a pretty big shock to your cardiovascular system. Start with shorter bouts like 10 to 15 minutes, then build to 2 to 4 rounds as tolerated, and listen to dizziness as a hard stop. Overall, my ratings are for evidence 8 out of 10. Strong observational outcomes plus biological and physiological data, and immediate cardiovascular changes. For risk, 3 out of 10. Low for most people when done sensibly, but higher with certain heart conditions, dehydration, or alcohol use. Next up is red light therapy, or photobiomodulation. First of all, what is it? Well, it's the use of red and near-infrared light on the body. The purpose is for it to interact with light-sensitive molecules in your cells to stimulate certain processes and improve tissue function. Importantly, the dose seems to matter quite a lot here. Too little does nothing, but too much can cause increased inflammation or tissue damage. This is called a biphasic dose response, and it's a thing. Delivery methods vary quite a bit too. Clinic lasers versus at-home LEDs, and spot treatment versus full panels or masks. It's painless, non-thermal at typical doses, and sessions are pretty short. So where does it actually work? Let's go over 3 categories of evidence: strong, medium, and weak. First, there is strong or clinically meaningful evidence for the use of red light therapy in the prevention and treatment of painful inflammation of the mucous membranes around the mouth in patients undergoing cancer therapy. In fact, international guidelines recommend red light therapy as part of care. Musculoskeletal pain has supportive evidence in specific conditions like neck pain across multiple randomized trials. And androgenic alopecia, also known as male or female pattern baldness, has randomized controlled trials showing that red light therapy can increase hair count and diameter, and it's FDA approved as an adjunct therapy. Next, medium or limited evidence. Skin rejuvenation and wound healing markers show improvements in some small trials, but results vary by device and dose, so the connection hasn't really fully been explored yet. Number 3, weak evidence. Big systemic claims about fat loss, testosterone boosts, or generalized mitochondrial optimization in healthy people are not well backed by high-quality human data yet. Now the risks. Overall safety is good when used as directed, especially with LED devices. Still, protect your eyes. Avoid staring into high irradiance sources, use goggles for facial treatments, and be extra cautious if you have retinal disease. Some devices aimed at the eye, like certain myopia-related red light devices, can actually exceed maximum permissible exposure if misused, so follow manufacturer guidance strictly. Skin burns are uncommon but can occur with misuse, very long exposures, or with high-powered lasers. Be extra cautious with photosensitizing medications, which can cause skin reactions when exposed to light, like doxycycline and retinoids. As for red light dosing, many protocols that show benefit deliver on the order of 4 to 10 joules per square centimeter at tissue level for superficial targets, and higher for deeper tissues. In other words, shorter, closer sessions beat marathon exposures. More red is not more benefit. Now my ratings for red light therapy. For evidence, I give it a 7 out of 10 overall. It's pretty strong for oral mucositis, decent for select pain conditions and hair loss, Mixed for skin, but pretty thin for systemic claims. For wrists, I give it a 2 out of 10. Pretty low with proper eye protection and dosing, but higher if you ignore safety or have ocular pathology. Now, if you can only pick one, and why? If your goal is cardiometabolic health or blood pressure support, and you're generally healthy, then sauna treatments give you the best blend of outcome data, mechanism, and low risk. If your priority is soreness relief after tough workout sessions or a mental jolt, cold can help. Just don't stack it immediately after heavy lifting if you care about muscle growth. If you have a specific indication, like oral mucositis prevention during cancer care, neck pain, or pattern hair loss, then red light is the targeted tool with the most supportive data. In the operating room and in the ICU, we manipulate temperature, hemodynamics, and oxygenation constantly. Cold and heat aren't biohacks, they're physiologic drugs with dose response curves and side effects. For people with arrhythmia risk, valve disease, or recent syncope, the wrong cold exposure can be a pretty bad idea. For dehydrated patients or those with unstable blood pressure, a long sauna can make you pass out and lose consciousness. And for anyone heading into surgery soon, I'd avoid extreme heat or cold in the 24 to 48 hours prior. There's no reason to add hemodynamic surprises to anesthesia day. Now some rapid-fire myth-busting in 60 seconds. Number 1, will cold plunge boost my metabolism long-term? Well, acutely metabolism rises somewhat, but long-term weight loss from plunges alone isn't supported. Number 2, can I cold plunge right after squats? Well, not if you care about muscle growth. I'd wait a few hours or maybe plunge on off days. Number 3, is infrared sauna the same as Finnish? No, they're different and they don't seem to confer the same benefits. Number 4, is red light safe for eyes? Well, don't stare into bright emitters, use goggles or face panels. Some eye aim devices can actually exceed safe exposure if they're misused. Number 5, can any of these replace exercise? No way. They may complement training and recovery, but they don't replace movement, sleep, or nutrition. So here are my final scores. For cold plunge, I give it a 5 out of 10 for evidence and a 6 out of 10 for risks. Use for soreness or alertness, delay after heavy lifts, progress gradually, buddy up, and keep your head out of water at first. For saunas, I give an 8 out of 10 for evidence and a 3 out of 10 for risks. This one's best overall for cardiometabolic support. Hydrate, avoid alcohol, stand up slowly, and use caution in heart disease or pregnancy. For red light therapy, I give it a 7 out of 10 for evidence and a 2 out of 10 for risk. It's great for oral mucositis, can be helpful for certain pain and hair loss. Protect your eyes and dose matters. Whatever you choose, treat it like medication. Right dose, right timing, and right patient. If you learned something today, hit like and share this with a friend who's pricing out an ice barrel. And drop your questions in the comments. What should we deep dive next? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.